In this video, I want to take a look at the counterpart to setting templates, which is setting helpers. Helpers are functions that the library provides to facilitate doing things both inside of templates and outside of templates. So there's a lot of different helpers that are used in the library throughout. All of everything, or I should say, everything that Klevu does can always be found inside of the Klevu object itself. So even though it is a function and any object that you pass into it will get merged into the settings for Klevu, it also has our after template render in it. There's an Ajax helper function. There's analytics is attached to this thing. There's the base structure. There's the before activation that we were looking at. Chains, there's all this chain functionality that's in here, these interfaces. There's components and core events, some stuff about CSS. There's DOM. And then from here you have first, get first, and then helpers. So we can go to helpers dot, and then here there's a bunch of DOM helpers that are available to us. And so here's where that get HTML was that we were using in the previous video. There's also escape HTML. There's get closest. A bunch of really, really useful functions that are available to you. And so these functions are they're available when we're doing our before activation or our modify request or our modify response or after template render or anything that we're doing. We can use those template or those helpers to facilitate doing certain things. So for example, one of the really cool things that that these helpers have, one of the really common ones, is there's an each function. And this function works, it's almost identical to the way that the jQuery each function works, except that instead of calling the each on the object itself, you pass in the first parameter is the object that you want to iterate over. So I could say something like, I'm going to say an array, and I have 1, 2, and 3. And then the second parameter is a function which receives whatever thing we're iterating, but the very first parameter is the index. We typically call it key in our code. And then the second one would be whatever the thing is. So I'm just going to say item. And so this code will iterate through this array, and then I can say console.log, and then I'll say item. And when I run this, it outputs 1, 2, and 3. Now the cool thing about this each function, unlike the one inside of jQuery, is that not only does it work with arrays, it also works with objects. So I could pass in an object that will have an ID of 1, 2, 3, and it'll also have a name of apples, and it'll have a type of fruit. And when I run this code, 1, 2, 3, apples and fruit, I could even pass in the key into that same console log, and then this time I get ID 1, 2, 3, name apples, type fruit. And this is just a really, really, really handy function to be able to run. And the cool thing is that this same function is also available as a helper within the template itself. So for example, I could literally move this same code directly into my product block. And again, it's not rendering anything. It's just, I mean, it is doing a console log, but that's not rendering anything. And in here, what I could do is I could say data local. That's my product inside of this product block. Now, again, data local could be something completely different in, like, for example, the filter template. If I was to output, and then I just say data local, actually, you know what, just to be on the safe side, because I don't know what this is, I happen to know that in this particular case, I believe it's a string, but I'm going to say console.log, and then in here I'm going to say from the filter template, and then I'll say data local. And I do need to jump out of JavaScript again. So I jumped into JavaScript. I'm doing a console log, and then I'm jumping out of JavaScript because, again, it's a string at the end of the day. So now that's going to be my filter section. And then I'm also going to have, and actually, you know what? Let's not do the filters, because obviously it did that KU empty thing. Let's go find another one. There's this, let's see, let's try this one. This Klevu landing template results header title. I'm just picking one at random. And it doesn't matter, like it's just gonna put that string as the template whenever it's trying to render this thing. And so I just want to do a console log from, whatever. And then over here, I'm doing a Klevu each of data local function key item. It's the exact same thing that I did over here, except that instead of iterating through this object that I just made up, I'm going to iterate over data local, which should be the product, which is an object that happens to have a price and name and SKU and all these other things that we saw in that response. So if I hit save, now I don't see, oh, I was just doing a console log, right? So if I take a look somewhere up here, oh, look at that, because it's just console logging everything that was inside of that particular product, right? So it says from the filter template, and then it says product list. So data local for the filter, or sorry, not for the filter template, but for this Klevu landing template results, because again, it's data local is specific to the template that's actually being rendered. And so in this case, data local, so it's from the filter template and then something, from the filter template and then something. So data local for this template is product list. It's just something. Then from there, we're basically saying, hey, grab the product every time that you're rendering one product block, go through each one of the things for the product. That object has name, SKU, all the stuff. In this case, it happens to have discount with a value of nothing. It has type with a value of jackets. It has item group ID with a value of blah, 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 blah. Free shipping with a value of nothing. Store base currency with a value of euro. Inventory item ID, etc., etc., etc. Now, some of these might actually be Booleans. So I'm not sure if it would actually output true, but maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But anyway, I'm still iterating through the whole entire thing, and at some point in time, right, like the first one was discount over here, at some point in time, I'm going to finish that first product, and then if the next one happens to have a discount, this is probably where the second product starts, and then so on and so forth. But I can go even further, right? I can do things like, let's just say up here. So outside of the template itself, I'm going to say var my counter is equal to 0. And then here, I'm going to say console.log my counter. And then I'll say plus plus. Actually, I'm going to say plus plus so that it adds the number before it's being console logged. But this way, it should, and then I'll just say new product. And I'll actually make it all caps, just so we could see it. This way, it should generate some global variable, and then every time that I'm console logging that global variable, I'm increasing it by 1, and then I say my new product, And then I should see my console logs. If I do a double quote, actually, instead of single quote, not sure if it's going to work, but I could say, return a new line. And it didn't like something. Unexpected token, and it's complaining about my product block. So something is invalid. Now, this is really cool. It doesn't render the template because there's an error in it. Everything else on the page does render, but in the console, it will tell you which template in particular actually caused the error. And in this case, it's just saying an invalid or unexpected token. The reason why it's talking about tokens is because it's turning the whole entire thing into a string. So let's see, what is it that it did not like? It's obviously something about this line, and I'm probably just missing it, but I'll get rid of that /r. Maybe that's what it didn't like. The my counter, I can't see what kind of problem it would have with that, but let's just try that. That's the only real thing that actually changed here. So I'm going to hit save and see if that gets rid of the problem, and it does. So it just didn't like that. But somewhere I should see my counter. So if I start from the top, 1, new product. 2, new product. Again, this is just JavaScript. The only reason why I'm doing this is because I want you to understand that there's no science to this. Like this is not some proprietary, there's no Babel involved, there's no transposation or anything. Like it's literally just JavaScript. This is very, very straightforward stuff. This Klevu each is a global function that I ran out here. Now the cool thing is, and this is what I wanted to show you, these helpers, there's a different scope of helpers that's available inside of the templates themselves. So if I said helper.each, it should still do the exact same thing. So everything still works. If I wanted to, I could say, instead of doing this, so let me get rid of all of this. And then this time what I want to do is I want to console log helper. Now it's doing it 12 times because there's 12 items on the page. But if I look at it, these are all of the helpers that are available to me for landing. There's something called add translation, build URL, crop text. There's my each that I was using a second ago. There's escape HTML. Hold on. Like that's the same function that was inside of the DOM helpers. There's get limit, get sort by. There's get translation, has filters, has results. These are functions that are only useful inside of the templates themselves. This has results isn't really necessary outside. So some helpers are only on the Klevu object itself. So I don't see DOM inside of here because that's not useful inside of rendering a template. It's useful outside to talk to the DOM and all that kind of good stuff. And then there's some things that are useful to the template that aren't useful outside of rendering a template, like the has results. So that's not available to me directly from that Klevu object. And the cool thing about it is that if I come back into the documentation and I look at this set helpers, it also has that same object way of doing it, but again, that's not the way that you're probably going to find it. You might find it this way in a customization. I do know that there are some customizations that do it this way, and if you notice, it is using the object notation. It's not the array thing. So the way that this one works is if you do bump into it, there's Klevu, then there's the object that's being passed in. It's the theme, so it always has to be theme. Set helpers is the thing that's being modified for the theme. And then the object, the thing that's like, this isn't some unique name. This is the scope of where these helpers are going to be hooked into. All, if I scroll down, or actually it's not even on here, but if we look at set template, and again, where was it? This determining scope thing, all applies to all of the modules or all of the themes. So whenever you say all, you're actually setting a helper for quick and landing and catnav and rec. So whichever one happens to be loaded on the page, because sometimes you might be on the home page and the only thing on the home page is quick. It's not that the whole thing won't run. It's just only going to run whenever quick needs it. Or if you land on the cart page or something, and the cart page happens to have a cart recommendation or a checkout recommendation is what we call it, and then but there's also quick. So then all of a sudden you'd be setting a helper for quick and recommendations. In the template of recommendations, you could say helper dot whatever that function is that you're setting, and then you'd be able to call that as well, and vice versa. So if we come back to our example over here, oops, let me redo this. Chances are it probably won't look right. There we go. So in this particular case, I could go to set helpers, and let's just go borrow this code. And then I'm just going to paste it right there. And so again, for everything, there's this hello Klevu, which is going to just essentially return a hello Klevu string. There's also something that's only for recs and quick. So on landing, if I put it into this product block that's only being registered for landing and catnav, it will not have this my helper function in it. It just won't have it. The reason why it won't have it is because it's not being registered to something that's executing on the page. So for example, if I did want it to show up, I would have to modify, and I don't have recommendations on this page, but I do have quick. And so for quick, if I come back to the template reference, and for the quick section, I'm going to go find the quick product block. And I'm just going to say that one. And I'm going to get rid of this line. So this time we're saying before activation for quick only, go ahead and set the template. And I'm not going to use this one. I am going to use this one instead, just to be silly. I'm going to hide this one. And then now this one in particular, because I did register this function, I'm going to say something to the effect of return. Whoa, this actually did something. So I should, in that template, be able to call helper.that function, and it doesn't accept any parameters, so I can just call it all by itself. And again, because this function is returning something, I can use the less than %equals to output that into this variable, which happens to be the template code that I'm registering for my quick search product blocks. So every single time that a product block is being rendered for quick, then I'm going to have this function run and output this particular string. So if I hit, let's see, what am I doing here? So I've got this one, which is my other product block, and it's doing this thing. This one has hello Klevu. So over here, I could come into, let's see, over here it's trying to render a badge. I'm going to go ahead and come right here and say %equals helper dot hello Klevu. And again, that one does not accept any parameters either, but I could have, and I could have did anything. I could have calculated something. I could have did anything. What I can't do is I can't do something asynchronously because this template is being rendered on the fly. Now, if I take a look at what was output for the helpers, there is a render function that's in the helper. That's the reason why helper.render works, is because that's how it works. There's HTML, there's translate. You'll find translations for all kinds of things that are happening inside of here. So a lot of this code is there to help you, but there's nothing stopping you, just like I showed before, of just calling any global function. It doesn't have to be something inside of helper. It could be anything at all, but I should see this hello Klevu for each one of the product blocks on the landing page, and then I should see, wow, this actually did something for each one of the products for the quick search. So here's my little badge of hello Klevu. And now this is trending product blocks. This is a different product block. If I turn on the hints like I showed you earlier, the name would not be the same as if I started to type something like blue. Then these are my product blocks. Whoa, this actually did something. Whoa, so this one's returning 3 different items. But that's how set helpers works. And again, Klevu each is a very, very powerful function. Render is another really, really powerful function. 2 other ones that I want to show you that are actually really, really amazing. They're not helpers for the templates, but they are helpers for everything outside of it. They're very useful inside of before activations, especially useful inside of modify request and modify response. These 2, it's a set. It's klevu.getObjectPath. And the way this one works is you pass it an object. And so let's say this object is going to be something that happens to have, let's see, it's going to have an ID equal to 123 and a type equal to ABC. That is what the object is. The way this works is that the first parameter is an object of some kind because it's get object, but it's by path. The second parameter is a string. And so I could say this object dot ID, right? Or I could say type. And if you notice what's being returned, it's returning ABC. It's fetching the type from that object, but it gets even better. I can go deep into this thing. I could say type is another object inside of the main object, and then it has something called, let's see, let's call it skew, right? So now when I fetch type, what's returned is an object that happens to have skew in it, but this type is a string, so I could say skew, and it will return ABC. Because essentially what it's doing is that it's taking the object that was passed in the first place, and then it's based on this path, it's trying to get the rest of it. Now, the cool thing about the way that this works is, what if I tried to call something that doesn't exist? Let's say I say apples. It comes back with undefined because there is no type skew apple inside of this object. This function also takes a third value, which is what do you want the default value to be if the thing isn't there, if it's undefined, if it's null, that kind of a thing. Not if it's false, but if it's null and undefined. If I say my default value is going to be pickles, then that's what's going to be returned because this is undefined. Now, if I remove this, the value is ABC. It's not pickles. Pickles is just there as what do you want to, have returned in its place just in case. Where this starts getting really, really, really interesting is that sometimes what you actually want to call up is an array of something, right? So I could have an array of ABC, DEF, right? And so that's what's being returned for type skew. But yeah, and it's returning that array. But what if that array doesn't exist, right? So let's say, for example, it's, I'm just going to make up something, but, fruit, right? Then it gives me that default. What I could do is that default could just be an empty array. That way, I can use this function to try to pull something that should be an array, but might or might not exist. If it doesn't exist, I want to get an array anyway, because what I want to do is, this is the reason why I said there's a counterpart to this. Now I want to do something like var temp array. And so again, this does not exist in this object. And I'm only doing it this way so you can actually see what it is. But I'm going to be returning an empty array. Because I'm returning that empty array, now I can sit there and do things like temp array dot push. And then I'm going to push, X, Y, Z into the array. And then I can call the counterpart, Klevu dot set object path. And then in this particular case, same kind of thing. Now, I don't happen to have a reference to this object, so I'm going to modify the code just a bit. I'm going to cut this object out, and I'm going to say my object. And then I'm going to go up here and say var my object is equal to that object that I created. So it's still the exact same thing, but this is kind of how you would use it. You would say, hey, get object path of this object, and then see if this thing exists. If it does exist, give me that. If it doesn't exist, give me this other thing so that at least I can still do things to it that I'm expecting to have happen. And then now I can go ahead and turn around and update that using the set object path, update the same thing. But this time I'm going to pass in my updated array. And then now I'm going to console.log my object. So when I do this, now, even though there was no fruit array, there was no fruit array. But I went ahead and said, hey, if there isn't one, give me an array. Let's push something to the array. And then let's push that thing back onto the thing. And then I end up with what I end up with. Now, granted, this is a bad example because, let's see, my temp object SKU was an array. So I'm not supposed to be able to do this fruit thing by turning it into an object, because I kind of screwed things up. But hey, push worked, and it did push into SKU when it did this set object path. So it did end up working. I guess a better example would have been if I would have omitted. So if I run this code one more time, let me pull it back up. And then I just go ahead and just omit SKU altogether. So type is an object. Heck, we don't even have to have type. We have an object that only has an ID on it. And I'm saying, hey, go get object path, and from that object, go find me type. There isn't one. Find me the SKU of that type. There isn't one. Find me the fruit of that. That's not there either. None of those things are there. So it's undefined. So it passes that default, which is temp array. I'm pushing into that empty array, this XYZ, then I'm setting the object path of all these things that don't even exist. And the value is going to be XYZ. When I run this code, now all of a sudden, I have the same ID, the same original object, except now it does have a type. It does have a SKU. it does have a fruit because I set the object by the path, and that path happened to be an array for fruit. And then that works just fine. So now one of the cool things that I can do is I can copy this object, rerun this function. I'm going to change this object to be this other object with all that stuff on there. And then this time I'm going to say, I don't know, lmn. When I run this function, there is a type, there is a skew, there is a fruit. It's an array that has XYZ. It's not going to give me a blank array. It's going to give me XYZ, an array with XYZ in it. Then I'm going to push lmn onto that array. Then I'm going to set the object path to be that new array that happens to have XYZ plus lmn. The reason why this is so magical and the reason why it's useful, and I wanted to make sure that I pointed this out to you, is that it's safer whenever you're modifying, like for example, if you're using the storefront API and you're gonna, you want to push in a filter that wasn't really there, right? Like there's some button, some interface, some toggle somewhere where if they toggle something, you want to trigger actually having a very specific filter. Or there's things called group conditions, or there's something else called a custom AND query. There's these other things that you can add on to the request that's being made. But whenever you're doing it, it's safer to try to see if there's something already there, give yourself a safe way out, make the modification that you want, and then push the thing, the modified thing, back in. That way, if there was something, you don't just replace it, you're actually adding on to it. That way you get to keep both. Now, if you wanted to, you could have added all kinds of conditions in here to see if you want to remove something from temp array, right? So maybe you want to replace XYZ with lmn, or there's all kinds of different things that you might need to do, but you can do it by retrieving the thing, doing whatever you want, whatever modifications you want, and then putting the thing back with the updated state. So now when I run this particular code, my fruit array has two things in it. I didn't willy-nilly replace or eliminate or squash or get rid of that XYZ like I would have if I would have just created a temp array, thrown my value into the thing without retrieving the first one first, the original one, whatever the original state was. If I'd have just created some array and threw something on there and just used set object path, it would have replaced the thing. This way, I'm merging into the thing. A very advanced thing, but I just wanted to show you how that works.